Welcome, everybody, to today's discussion on reducing your cyber risk for contractors and construction firms. My name is David Cruz. I'm the Director of Insurance Alliances here at Arctic Wolf. And if you recognize my name, it's because I used to work for the Houseman Group. I was part of the Houseman team for about 6 years prior to joining the Arctic Wolf team in late 2019. So as I see some registrations and some names show up, it's fun to see those because I was personally involved in writing some of those cyber insurance policies back in the day once they were first put in place. So it's a good full circle homecoming kind of moment for me here today. So I'm excited to be a part of it here. So we're going to dive a little bit deeper into a program that you might have already heard of. So we launched a program with the Houseman Group about a month and a half ago called the Cyber Jumpstart Program. And we're going to do a bit of a deep dive into that. But before we get into that, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about what the current state of cybersecurity is for construction firms in 2023. Every industry, every type of business experiences cybersecurity incidences and claims in a different way. So it's worth our time to focus on industry verticals and focus on the types of problems that they face, because that's going to certainly change how we position our defenses. So we're going to get right into it. We're going to, with each one of the things we're talking about, we're going to go big, and then we're going to get a little bit more narrow as we go through here. So to start right off, we're going to first talk about the frequency of cyber insurance claims. They have gone up pretty dramatically over the past, say, 10 years or so. And there's a whole lot of reasons for that. So they've gone up about 562% per Chubb. Chubb is the biggest writer of cyber insurance in the world. And that increase isn't an increase in just the raw number of claims. That's an increase in the percentage of policies that have had claims filed upon them in any given year. So it's a big number. So one of the reasons that we're seeing that is that if you look over the past 10, 15 years, think about the businesses that you've worked at and think about the amount of the amount of your job that is dependent on some sort of a computer network or some sort of software application. The digital transformation is certainly the buzzword of the decade, I'd say. But that really has had meaningful impacts on the types of cybersecurity problems that an organization has to face, because more and more of the business's operations are now reliant upon some sort of digital infrastructure to make that happen. So 10, 15 years ago, payroll might not have been entirely online, accounting might not have been. Think sales and pipeline management, human resources. A lot of these things might have had very, small sorts of involvements with technology. Maybe you'd use a computer and a file server, but now there's whole software applications that we rely upon to make this happen. So the more we've expanded that attack surface, the greater likelihood of an increased number of claims. And the construction industry is certainly no stranger to that. So what we're looking at here is a breakdown of all of the industries that we've worked cases for over the past year. And I'll take a step back and sort of introduce Arctic Wolf here. One of the main services that we provide is cybersecurity incident response. So if you're a business that has a cyber insurance policy and you suffer a ransomware attack or a business email compromise, or you're a victim of wire transfer fraud, any sort of nasty cybersecurity incident, we'll get brought in by the insurance company to help restore your systems, find out what happened and how it happened and why it happened, things of that nature. So what we're looking at here is all of the incidences that we worked over the past year broken down by industry. And construction, right down here, you can see that it accounts for around only maybe 6 to 8% of all incidences that we worked last year. But when you look at the chart as a whole, the big takeaway that we can see here is that outside of the healthcare industry, maybe being a bit of an outlier, generally speaking, there's no one industry that's way far ahead in terms of overall targeting by threat actors. What that means is, what the takeaway that we can bring from this is that threat actors most often are opportunists. They're looking for targets of opportunity. They're not necessarily out there looking for specific industries like, hey, I'm going to go after finance and insurance, or hey, I'm going to go after education and nonprofit. Some industries make themselves more susceptible to attacks just because, there's a whole host of reasons why that might be the case, but some industries might be more susceptible. But at the end of the day, threat actors are opportunists, and they will go after any target that they're able to hack. And oftentimes they don't know who they've hacked until after they've hacked them, which is just a whole interesting conversation that we can get into another time. But it has everything to do with how they scan for targets and exploit the vulnerabilities they can find. So that's really our takeaway here, is that this is a problem across industries. It's not a problem of just any one industry. What we're also seeing too is that when companies get hit with a cyber attack, they're paying on average a higher cost. So if the last data point told us that incidences are becoming more frequent, this one is telling us that incidents are becoming more severe. And this data is coming right to us from the Net Diligence Cyber Claims Study. Net Diligence, they're essentially an industry trade association for cyber insurance companies. And one of the things that they do is do claims data aggregation across those companies. So every carrier out there will share some of their data with Net Diligence around the number of claims they paid, the type of claims they paid, how much they paid to settle those claims, on and on and on. And that's where these numbers come from. So in 2018, it was around $87,000 was our average incident cost. And now that in 2021, 22 and beyond, we're seeing that at 200,000 and up. So the main driver for that has a lot to do with the evolution of the ransomware market. If you're not familiar with the term ransomware, and my guess is most people on this call probably are, but in the event that you're not, ransomware is essentially a tool that threat actors will use to gain access to your company's network, lock up the files and systems on that network, and then demand that you pay them an extortion payment in order for them to release that data again. And that in 2018, the average extortion payment that they might demand might be $5,000. In 2021 and 2022, that average was closer to $200,000. And in fact, the biggest ransom payment that our firm was involved in helping facilitate per a client's request was about 3.8 million in 2022. So the demands that threat actors have been making have gone up, and that's directly led to higher incident cost and greater incident severity for anybody that's had to deal with a cyber insurance claim. So just to put a little bit more granularity around this, I think this is helpful. If we look at the construction industry again, so if we get brought into work a construction industry incident response case, what we're looking at is an average incident cost of around $50,000 for our firm's services. What's not included here are things like legal fees that might be necessary to protect this investigation under attorney-client privilege, business interruption costs, the actual ransom payment, if you choose to make a ransom payment, notification to affected individuals if you have a legal obligation to notify them that something's going on. So there's a whole host of costs that might add on top of this, and all of those are directly impact the severity that businesses face in the construction industry whenever they face a cyber attack. So really where that leaves us is that we have a higher claims frequency. We have a higher claims severity, and carriers they're not dumb. There are a lot of things, but they're not dumb. They take the data that they get from the claims that they've paid, and they've created a more demanding insurability process in order to even qualify for cyber insurance, let alone qualify for cyber insurance on terms that you're excited about purchasing. So those are kind of the three core problems we see businesses of any type, and construction is certainly no stranger to that over the past few years. So the good news is that we have some very specific tools in our tool belt that we can use to counteract those frequency and severity trends. The most frequent type of attack that we see in our incident response work is an attack that has its root point of compromise, or the root cause, in an external exposure issue. Now, when I say external exposure, I mean any software program you're running, any laptop, desktop, server, any piece of computer hardware that is accessible via the internet. If you could go from your computer at home and somehow send a signal to your work desktop or your laptop or a website, that's an external exposure concern. So what our data tells us is that 3 out of every 4 ransomware attacks and network infiltration issues we see have the root point of compromise as an external exposure issue. And we know threat actors will find their targets by scanning a network, looking at the scan results and seeing if there's some kind of vulnerability. And if there's a vulnerability they know how to compromise, they then compromise it. The good news there is that, again, this is the most frequent issue, and you can use the exact same tools that the bad guys use to launch your attacks. You can scan your own network and find those vulnerabilities before they're able to find them, and patch or update your systems so that whenever they scan you, they just don't see anything and they move on to another target. So that's how we attack the frequency issue. Where we look at construction right here, Construction's a little different here in the sense that instead of being around 72% of the construction industry's problems coming from external exposure, it's a little lower. And what we see in the construction industry is that things like phishing emails are maybe another common way to compromise a construction company. You think about how your firms transfer data back and forth. A lot of it's in PDFs. A lot of it's blueprints of a plan or something like that. A lot of business gets conducted that way. So the construction industry is actually a little bit above average in terms of phishing email compromise, but a huge proportion of the industry is still attacked via those external exposure methods we just talked about. So any good risk manager will tell you that if you want to make meaningful gains in reducing risk, you can't just focus on frequency, you also have to focus on severity. If you just focus on severity and not frequency, you're going to be mired in 1,000 tiny little claims that'll eat up your time. And if you just focus on frequency but not severity, the one infrequent claim you have could be just an extinction level event. So we need to focus on frequency and severity. One of the ways that we know that we can reduce the severity of a cybersecurity incident is by having a written incident response plan and a defined incident response team. If you think about, if any of you played sports growing up, if you were in middle school or high school, or maybe played at the collegiate level, if you're really talented, any coach will tell you that when you begin your sport, you need to start from sort of a ready stance or a fighter's stance. You don't want to get caught flat-footed, because then when the hit comes, it's going to knock you right over. But if you're in a bit of a fighter's ready stance, you're going to still take the hit, but you'll be able to be resilient throughout that hit. That's exactly what an incident response plan does. It puts your business in a ready posture so that if and when something happens, you've put in the time and effort to understand how this might unfold and who the people are that need to be in charge of how it unfolds. So going through that exercise will have very significant gains on reducing incident severity. So what does that mean for us? How do we actually address the most frequent claims? How do we reduce the severity of claims and ultimately equip you for a demanding insurability process? To help answer some of those questions, we've partnered with the Houseman Group to deliver something called the Cyber Jumpstart Program. And I'm going to explain to you what that is right now. So the Cyber Jumpstart Program is an online software application that is going to enable three things. It's going to enable you to build an incident response plan. So we know that has a meaningful impact on reducing incident severity. So we're going to give the ability to build an incident response plan that's custom to your organization. What's great about this is that not only do you leave with the incident response plan, having an incident response plan also helps support higher level risk management activities. Pardon me. Having an incident response plan also helps support higher level risk management activities like a tabletop exercise. If you've never done a tabletop, that's where you take your incident response plan and you start throwing hypothetical scenarios at it, and you see how your incident response plan is designed. And what you really find out quickly is that, hey, you might not have thought about this situation in this way, or hey, our plan doesn't address this issue. And it's better to find that out in a controlled conference room type setting and not in the middle of a live fire ransomware attack, for example. But the key is you can only do those activities if you actually have an incident response plan. So we're going to help you build one of those. The second area that we're going to help you focus on is security project guides. So that is particularly aimed at the insurability problem and the insurance renewal process. We know that there's defined categories of controls that insurance carriers like to see. So we're going to help you get out the gate on planning some of those projects and really help build the protection gap between where you ought to be and where you are right now, with the goal of helping you improve your insurance terms. And lastly, we had talked about scanning being a key to reducing incident frequency. So surprise, we are giving you access to a threat scanner that you can use to help reduce incident frequency, which automatically will mean that you're going to identify immediate disqualifiers for insurance as well. Again, we said that insurance carriers aren't dummies, so they know which vulnerabilities are most likely to lead to a claim. And if they scan your environment during the underwriting process, and they typically do, they'll find those vulnerabilities, and then you're not going to be offered insurance terms in many cases. So if you can find those vulnerabilities before the carriers do, you're just going to have a much smoother renewal experience here. So with that, we are actually going to stop sharing this screen. I'm going to share what the platform actually looks like, and then we'll just get right into it. So one moment here. Okay, so The first thing you're going to do, and you'll receive this link in a follow-up to today's session, and you likely have received this in a link that was sent in a prior email. The first thing you're going to do is register for access to the Jumpstart portal here. So with the link that you have right here, you'll enter in your first name, last name, email address, kind of your typical registration information. Hit sign up, and then that's going to immediately prompt you to create a username and a password and enable multi-factor authentication for your Cyber Jumpstart portal access. Once you've done all of that, then you will land in the portal that looks just like this. You'll see your business name up here. You'll see the Houseman Group logo, so you remember the good folks that helped make this possible. And then the 3 modules that we reviewed, you're going to see those right here as well. So the first thing that I'd recommend you do is to open up the incident response plan and start to familiarize yourself with the types of information that you need to have an effective incident response plan. The first section that you want to look at are your internal leads, like who is your executive response leader, your technical leader, your financial leader. Maybe you want somebody from your legal team included. Whoever you want to be in the room where it happens, so to speak, you want to include their names and contact information here too. And you want to make sure that they know that they're on that incident response team. The second thing that we're going to encourage you to do is define who your external response team is. So who's your incident response vendor? Arctic Wolf, we're an incident response vendor. Who's your primary IT provider? Do you work with a third-party managed service provider, for example? Do you have a data privacy law firm? My guess is most firms on this call probably don't have a data privacy law firm. Typically, you'll be introduced to one if you actually have an incident. But if you do, in fact, have a data privacy firm, you can include their contact information right here. And then you want to include your cyber insurance information as well, because really after you have some kind of an incident, filing a claim is one of the first things you ought to do. So you can include your information for your Houseman Group contacts here, and then you can include the information for your actual insurance company as well. The next thing that we're going to encourage your IT team to do is document your locations and networks and a lot of the nitty-gritty network data that we'll need to launch an effective incident response. This is, if you think about, if you were to call the fire department and say, hey, I've got a fire happening, they'd say, great, where is it? Let's get there. And if you can't tell them your address right away, they're not going to show up and they won't know what to do. It's not that different here. We need to know exactly where the fire could be happening for us to be able to respond. So being able to share this with your incident response vendor on a timely basis is going to make life much simpler for you. From there, we're going to be moving into incident escalation and detection procedures. A lot of this is related to how do you plan to communicate with one another during the course of an incident. If you know a hacker's in your network, you probably shouldn't be communicating via email because the hacker could be watching those emails. So you want to define what some out-of-band communication methods might be so that you don't run into that same problem. And then the last piece that we'll encourage you to do is define critical business functions and define the IT systems that support those functions. This really helps you merge executive expectations and IT realities, because executive teams might say, hey, we just got hit with an attack. We need to be up and running in 24 hours. But if they've never talked to the IT team to determine if that's even possible, probably not going to happen. So this encourages IT and executive teams to work together to determine what are the core functions and do we have enough resources to get them up and running in an acceptable period of time. So we want to encourage those conversations ahead of time. So once all that's done, you'll hit finish right here. And then right down here, you can download a summary of that incident response plan. It'll be a PDF that you can save offline so that if your computer system does go down, you've got a written incident response plan, maybe in a locked desk drawer, for example. The plan will always be contained in Cyber Jumpstart as well. So even if you didn't print off the copy and you fall victim to an attack, you can still access it right here on the Jumpstart platform itself. So from there, we'll move to the second module here, which is the Jumpstart Threat Scanner. So if the incident response planner can help reduce incident severity, this is what's going to help us reduce incident frequency. So once you actually log into this portion here, the first thing that I'd recommend doing is updating what you can think of as think of it like a digital property schedule here. Every commercial insurance policy, every property insurance policy has a property schedule where you list all the properties that you want included on that insurance policy. Think of this like the digital version of that, where you're going to enter in all your websites, you're going to enter in all your IP addresses. And then once you've done that, we will scan those websites and IP addresses and let you know if we have found any critical threats. Now at Arctic Wolf, we define a critical threat as a technical vulnerability that we can discover with a scan, and that we've also seen lead to nasty ransomware claims or network intrusion claims, things like that. So we're really laser focused on the things that are most likely to ruin your day. So in this particular incident, we found this one vulnerability. So if your IT team wants to learn more about it, they can learn when it was discovered, they can learn the exact system it was discovered on, and that's going to enable them to go and fix that problem. And then if they realize, hey, you know what, actually, I could use some help fixing that problem. I don't really know what I'm doing myself. They can hit get help, and then they can reach out to us. And then if what they need is a fuller engagement to actually fix the problem, we can arrange one with them as well. So one point to note about the Jumpstart Threat Scanner, it's that for the first 30 days after you activate your account, the threat scanner is a no-cost feature for you. After 30 days, what you want to do is upgrade to essentially the weekly scanning here. So what that means is that for a $250 charge annually, we'll scan your network every week and let you know what threats we're finding. If you choose not to upgrade, that's entirely okay. But your actual scanning capability is throttled back a little bit. So just want to be very upfront with that. From an IT security standpoint, that's a pretty affordable cost. So hopefully that's not an impediment to anybody here, but it does cost us somebody to maintain the tool. So we have to share that cost, I guess. So last thing we'll point out here are the Jumpstart guides. So earlier we had talked about how sometimes an IT team just needs a little bit of point me in a direction, tell me what to do, and I'll go and execute on it. That's really what the Jumpstart guides are designed to do, is to point you in a direction, say, here's what your plan looks like, now go and execute on that. So if you are applying for cyber insurance or maybe renewing a policy, you might see requirements for things like employee security and training, email protections, 24/7 monitoring, whatever that particular control requirement is. You can click on the security project, get a bit of a description as to what that control is, have some learning resources that help describe what that control is. And then from there, you can either document proof of performance for that control, or you can reach out to us if you need additional assistance and you actually need to purchase a product to implement that control. We can either offer that ourselves, or we can connect you with a local technology partner that can help you out with that. The last thing that I'll share with you here is if you are watching this and you're in, say, a risk management role, a CFO or a controller or something like that, you're going to want to add your IT team into this platform, and everybody's going to want to use the same version of the platform, so to speak. We don't want IT to have their version and finance to have their version. We need everybody singing off the same songbook here. So if you're watching this and you've created your platform, or you've created your access, click add user, type in the first name, last name, and email address of the person that you want to add, hit save, and that will add them as a user to the platform, just to make sure that everybody's singing off the same songbook here. So with that, we're going to hop back into the slide deck, I should say, and then we will wrap things up for today. All right, so again, just to review your next steps here, designate a representative in your organization that can serve as essentially the administrator for your Jumpstart access. Register using the link that you see right here, and it will also be included in the email that gets sent out. You'll set up multi-factor authentication. We wouldn't be a good security company if we didn't encourage that. And then invite your teammates, and then actually begin your security journey there. So one final note is that everybody at Houseman has been briefed on this, so to speak. So the agents and the producers and the account managers and the CSRs, everybody is in the know on this. So if you've got questions, feel free to reach out to them. And if they don't know the answer, they're going to reach out to me, and then I might just give you a call myself. So either way, you've got a lot of support from Houseman, and you got a lot of support from me as well. So if we can do anything to help, please don't hesitate to ask. But Cassie, I think that brings us home for the day. Is that right?